What is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to part 2 of the conversation between Jimmy Guevara and myself. If you haven't heard part 1, it's okay. You really don't need to hear part 1 to listen to part 2, but I promise you that you're missing some good stuff. I mean, Jimmy's a storyteller, and you really get to know who Jimmy is by listening to what he says, how he says it, and really his intention behind just the story he's telling at the moment. So really check on over to part 1 of our conversation and come back over to part 2, or, listen to part 2 and go over to part 1. I don't care. To recap where you're at, this is You're the Vet, and I thank you for tuning right back in. If you're a first-time visitor, welcome. And You're the Vet is a platform to honor the veterans that have served and talk about their transition stories so we can help normalize transition and take away the fear and the solitude and the questions that people have that they don't even know they have yet. Just bring all that stuff out and give it right to you right here on this platform. So that's what You're the Vet is. And I'm honored to give it to you. So tell your friends, tell your family, use it yourself. Tune back in and listen to the story. So without harping too much more on it, check out You're the Vet on all social media platforms. Well, most social media platforms. You can figure out which ones I don't have. So let's get right into this Jimmy conversation. Because you weren't forced out, it was an option. And so let's actually talk about that. Because that mindset, I mean, the epitome of getting back on the horse is sitting right here in front of me. Yeah. And so Fallujah ends. At what point in the Marine Corps are you like, I gotta go back home? I can't do this anymore.
Well, I think it's when I went back on leave. So I come back home and I get the same freaking questions. Like, did I kill anybody?
Of course.
Am I okay? Do you have the PTSD?
The PTSD, yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm good to go. I'm solid, And my mom, she's, like I said at the time, my mom has been going through her own stuff as well. Just dealing with like people fucking her over. My stepdad being unsupportive and just kind of also leaving her as well. So it became a big issue, And to me, she tried to put this front that everything was okay.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I started when she would leave the room and a lot of her friends would tell me, yeah, your mom's been sick, like ever since you've been out there, like because there was time that I would call her and I would have to hang up immediately because we would get like a motor drop or something, and I never wanted her to hear the alarms going off either.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be like, hey, let me call you back before the alarms went off.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would hear the explosion. I'm like, oh no, somebody. I used to say, oh, that's us going out,
mm-hmm.
just to kind of keep her at ease. And they would tell me that like, yeah, she's been getting sick. She's been dealing with a lot of depression, and I realized that me deploying was what was making her sick.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to make a decision at that point. Do I stay in or do I get out? And this is where kind of my staff sergeant comes in too. He saw that I came back and I was just like all over the place. I think it also started because of the way we got our welcoming home. I guess it was different for single Marines or Marines that don't have money, because there's also a difference in people that they go into the Marine Corps, their family might have money and they're able to travel versus like a lot of other families that don't, like especially if you're in North Carolina, they're not be able to pay that like $500-$600 like flight just to go to North Carolina, And my mom was one of those, and so I show up home, and at the same time, I remember like feeling that experience. Like the only person that was greeting me were 2 or 3 members of my old platoon that stayed behind because they got hurt or they were not deployable, and I saw that look on their face of like they're happy to see me, but at the same time, they're not happy to see me because I could see that they missed out on an experience that they weren't able to do.
Yeah.
And I saw that in their face. The way they talked to me was so different, compared to those that deployed with me. We had war stories about a bunch of shit that happened when we were over there.
Yeah.
And it was so different. You could feel the atmosphere was different. And so for me, I made it a point where every time, like, I started welcoming everybody. I was like, yo, as soon as you guys are done with here, just go to my room, grab some beers. I've got a bunch. I know they're telling you not supposed to. Fuck them.
Yeah.
Just, just come over, whatever. And I was also pissed off because they didn't have none of our rooms ready, knowing that we're coming. So we're already pissed off. And we're just pretty much letting out steam the first two weeks and stuff, just wilding out, being just all over the freaking place,
Yeah.
I remember one of our classes was all like, when you go back to your families, you're no longer, remember, if you have kids, you're no longer the head of the household. Make sure you're patient. And I remember this one, like, don't have relations with your girlfriend, wife, whatever you have. Nobody ever listens to those because they're like, you might be you have a lot of built up. Anyways. And I remember going back to this unit and it was like, my staff sergeant, he saw that something was bothering me, He saw my mindset had changed. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just that because I was more about, I wanted to train harder. I wanted to keep training these guys to be harder. And I was burning out a lot of our guys too. At the same time, I was getting fed up with the bullshit. Like, oh, we have to go do this Mando training about whatever's, or Mando training on this. And I was not having it. I was just like, no, this is not. I'm all like, we need to train to be faster. We need to, we need to do more stuff. We need to be able to be more adaptable to different fields. And I was trying to bring that to the table, but like a lot of our new lieutenant, because I was in a new platoon now. New lieutenant, new staff sergeant weren't listening to anything we had to say. I remember my staff sergeants are like, why are you so mad? Like, why are you so angry again? Like, he saw that, like, why are you angry again? I'm like, I don't know. I told him, I really don't know why. And he thought, like, and same conversation. It's interesting that happens like almost 2 years later. He goes like, why don't you become a drill instructor? I thought it was funny. He wanted me to stay in. I know he was disappointed that I left, but he didn't know the full story of why I needed to leave.
Yeah.
On one hand, I had re-enlistment orders on one side, and at the same time, I knew I had to deal with talking back and forth with my family and everything. I decided, you know what, I need to do what's best for my family, not because I want to, because I have to.
Yeah. Now, we didn't really touch on the relationship between you and your mom prior to this decision, and I think it's important because, and it's brief. I'll briefly bring it up because you and I are a lot alike. Where I did not have mutual respect for my mother. And, I would say still similar to this day, but it's a little bit different. I'm a little bit older. But at that time, you grew up with, I don't want to say no respect, but not the respect that other kids have for their parents.
Yeah.
So at this point, you're about to make this decision, this really big decision of getting out to go help and support a person that you really didn't have a bond with. Right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's because I guess I remember going to work with my mom. She's a housekeeper. And I remember she pretty much breaks her back just to be able to. I remember being a kid watching her try to just keep us afloat.
Yeah.
On top of that, trying to find father figures for myself, and and every time she kind of just kept like falling into a bad hand. So now I knew that I'm in a good position now where I'm able to help my mother versus not before. When I'm in the military, I can't really help her if I'm all over the world.
Yeah.
So I sat there for a good minute. I think it was like a month a month and a half before I had to get out. My contract was about to be up, and I was like, I ripped the papers apart, and I decided that I had to go home. So the whole time while I was there, I had to play the funk like the guys that were getting med sept and everything. Thought, I could hardly wait to get out the Marine Corps, and I followed suit. I did the same thing. I could just say, I could hardly wait to get out, even though it was half-assed when I was saying it. I was like, the Marine Corps sucks, blah blah blah, whoop-de-whoop, and I was just like, it wasn't even like that. For me, I loved the Marine Corps.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the Corps. The Corps gave me so much experience and so much It was hard for me to say, to rip up those papers And I remember drinking my ass off that night, but that's besides the point. But I didn't want to leave because I felt like I still had a lot to teach. I wanted to, I did consider even becoming a drill instructor for a minute. And I wanted to do all these things. I wanted to continue working with my buddy Boogie and, continue on to the next unit together, because we've been together since we were in Okinawa. I mean, not even Okinawa, since 29 Palms.
Yeah.
So now I'm losing one of the biggest brotherhoods I ever had across the board. And
yeah,
he's staying. I'm leaving. A couple of other guys are staying. And the same guys that stayed with me behind over there are the ones that are staying. I'm the only one that's leaving.
Yeah.
So kind of it felt weird. So I had to play the game of fuck this, I'm leaving. Fuck the Marine Corps, blah, blah. When that was not even my real, feelings.
You put on a mask.
I put on that mask. Just to make it easier. So, and I remember talking to my staff sergeant before I left, and I saw that look of disappointment, But of course, he doesn't know the full story. Same with a lot of people. They didn't know the full story of why I was leaving. I just told them, I'm just tired of the...
Now, why? Why didn't you indulge that story?
I think it was because it would have been easier for me just to leave.
Yeah.
It would have been harder if I told them, because then at the same time, I don't want them to feel sympathy for me either. I didn't want them to think try to talk me out of it either. Because I know if I would have told them, they would have found something, or they would have, I don't know. I think I just didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I just avoided it completely and just put up this front. And it was easier because at this point, once I saw that look of disappointment and that talking was different between me and them at that point, it was easier just for me to walk away.
Yeah.
Versus if I was to stay there, it would have been So for me, it made it easier, I guess you could say.
Man. So, yeah, I remember because I didn't want to get out. I mean, I was forced out, right?
Yeah.
So, but I do hear a lot of stories from some of the guests and other vets that I talked to that, when they made the decision to get out, that they were kind of shunned or outcasted, or I hear that story a lot. So it's interesting, especially coming from an individual who has this hardiness for the Marine Corps, that loves the Corps, wants to teach all the upcoming Marines, wants to make the Marine Corps better. To hear that somebody with so much motivation and drive would be shunned, it puts in perspective just the differences between the military family and the mindset, and then having to separate.
Yeah.
So when you got out,
that fucking story.
Yeah. So you're now integrating back into this world that didn't understand you before you left, and now definitely doesn't understand you.
I think I was angry coming out.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was just angry at myself. I don't think I was just angry at myself, or I don't know. I think I was just angry at society as a whole.
Why?
Because I came back and everyone stopped talking about the war. I guess that's what's weird. First off, nobody was out there. It was just it was a thing that happened.
Yeah.
9/11 happened. That was cool. They're looking at me yeah, that happened 5 years ago. Why are you still dwelling on it? It's because we're out there still fighting. It's not like we're not doing anything out there. But and then the first month I got bored. I had nothing to do, so I picked up whatever job I could pick up.
Yeah.
I was a caterer for 6 months. Then I was and I realized that all that work, I told them yeah, I did communications, I did that, and everywhere I applied, nobody wanted to pick me up. If it wasn't for somebody I knew that worked at a catering business, that was the only way I was even able to get a job at first. I was like, okay. And even then, I was catering to the spoiled, to the people that haven't okay, they went through college, they got their degree, now they're now feed me.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. I felt like I was back to being not even a last call, but a brand new recruit, trying to relearn everything. And I remember going back and forth for a long time where I was just I was constantly pissed off at the fact that I was doing this job when I know that I'm not. To me, nothing against the job. It's just that I felt like I could do so much more. I was like I couldn't sit there. And I was going to school, but at school I wasn't even paying attention because half my peers were like 18, 19-year-old kids that were just sitting there, just not like half-assing everything. And it made me half-ass everything because I was like, if you don't care, why should I? And then at the same time, the professors weren't even taking control of their own. So it was always constantly that, you know what, F this, I'm out of here. You're not teaching me anything new.
Yeah.
I felt like I wasn't learning at all. And then at the same time, they told me, oh yeah, just so you know, you need to take algebra again. You need to take English. And I'm just like, wait, I got to start over again and this too? I'm all like, no way.
Yeah.
I ain't doing this. I'm all like, what about like half the things that they don't apply to community college. So I'm just like, all right. And then I stopped going to class because I was just like, I was fed up with like the conversations they were having in class. You know, people were not they were disrespectful towards the professors, and I wasn't used to that. I remember walking into the college system where there was only a cubicle of somebody. They were brand new to their job too, so I couldn't even be mad at them because they were brand new at the whole veteran verification process themselves. They're like, oh yeah, you just take classes and you just go to class, and then I'm just sitting there. No one's talking to. I don't even know who's who anymore.
Yeah,
I don't know who's who. And this whole time, I'm just like, am I the only one that's going like crazy over here? Like, am I the only one that's like pissed off at half of these kids that don't appreciate what they have? And then I had that mindset. I'm like, do you understand? You're complaining about the most dumbest thing ever. Like the fact that you have to do one more page of a paper, and I'm like, and that's all you have to do, and this is what you're complaining about.
Yeah.
And that pissed me out to a point where I was just like, you know what? I stopped caring. I didn't care anymore because I'm like, if no one else cares, I'm like, why am I caring? No one else is like here doing anything.
Yeah.
And there was no camaraderie.
Talking about
nobody talks to each other in class. Yeah.
The only ones that are talking about Kim and Kanye.
Yeah, and I'm just I'm so over. At the time, it wasn't even Kanye yet. It was just Kim.
Yeah.
Kim and Ray J with their brand new sex tape or whatever, and it was just like, oh my! And then I started working for Charter, and then I started going into people's home, and these people were more spoiled than the people I saw in the classroom.
Yeah,
I'm all like, well, I want it this way, but I'm all like, do you understand? Me working comm already, I'm all like, look, sir, do you understand that this your system's gonna work better if you put your wireless up here? So you're able to get across. I'm like, no, I want it here because I want it because this is the most convenient spot. It's away from. I'm like, true. And then sure enough, I get a call back within a month. I'm like, why am I not getting internet on this side? I'm like, I was just here a month ago telling you that you need it over on this side, and they're like, no, but I still want it here. How do I get more? I'm like, you can't do it with the equipment that we have here. This is as far as it goes, unless you want to add another one. No, because that's more money, and I'm like. Everything always came down to money.
Yeah.
And so I was just getting frustrated. I remember I was like, I was constantly frustrated with everybody's attitude towards not being adaptable to their own personal stuff. Or when you do give them the good stuff, they wouldn't the good advice, they wouldn't take it. And then later on they want to complain about you because they say that you didn't do a good enough job when you're just like, wait, I just did everything you asked me to and then some.
Yeah.
And then now you want me to change because because you're not getting your way.
Yeah.
And these are all spoiled people, and I'm just like, oh my God. And then
so you went from being a server at the same time you were in college in JC.
Yeah.
At the same time as that.
Yeah.
And then at some point you're like, I don't want to be a server. I want to go get a real 9-to-5.
Yeah.
So are you working at Comcast at the same time you're going to JC right now?
No, at this point now, yes, I went to Charter. I was working with Charter for
Charter.
Yeah, Charter, yeah. And I was working for them I worked for them for 3 years, and then I got some of my boys coming out because.
So, but you had already quit school.
I already had not yet.
Okay.
I was still taking part-time classes here and there.
Okay.
But because of how much the work was at Charter Communication, I had to do constant certain amount of jobs, and the first supervisor I had were Marines, so they understood the way we thought. Then they changed me to this other guy that he just said, just get the job done. It was more like, No, and he got stuck in his old ways, like where he wasn't adaptable to the new technology. He didn't want to learn the new technology. So when you try to explain to him why certain things wouldn't work, they're like, no, but it's always worked for me in this way. You're expecting us to do these jobs, but you don't understand the job itself. How do you expect us to, so it became that like constant conflict.
Yeah. I see a lot of that when in my first job. I saw a lot of, we're used to doing it this way, or, this is the way it's always been done. You're like, man, it's 2000X right now. It's not 1974, bro.
Where like these guys were working on analog and we're working on digital now.
Yeah.
Where their jobs required only like doing 2 jobs a day when we're trying to push out 8.
Yeah.
And we're working with digital versus them working with just like a basic antenna.
Yeah.
We're working now with like modems and freaking cable and like VoIP. Well, this guy's all he ever had to do was plug and play with a freaking cable box.
Yeah.
And so it's now becoming this thing where they're like, well, you need to perform. But I'm like, I'm giving you the reasons why it's hard to get to this point. I'm like, you're not gonna be able to push out this many jobs if you don't understand that these certain areas have issues and you don't want to fix that. And we bring back the reports, we bring back the numbers, we bring back all the data that needs to be done to fix it, but they don't want to fix it because they're like, well, you're just a technician.
Yeah.
Well, like then what's the point of us being like? It became so I was just like, so I stopped focusing on school. I gave up. I quit. I think it was 2000. I won't say 2008. I quit because I was just like, I was so sick and tired of them pulling me doing all this overtime because they didn't want to clean up their backyard.
Yeah.
And the whole time just like, I'm so sick and tired of these guys,
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. No one's backing each other up. And every time something went wrong in their section, they would throw us under the bus every single time. Yeah. And we would get write-ups for little dumb things. Like, to me, these weren't leaders. I was back to being back at that lance corporal with that corporal again. I'm just like, no. And so I stopped concentrating and I stopped. I left my community college with a 0.67. That was my GPA because I stopped caring.
Yeah.
Because it was like, I'm starting over. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Well, you said a few weeks ago that you have a theory about why vets don't do well in school.
I feel like first of all, we're non-traditional students. We don't think like your average freaking student. So the average student's already used to being like at school, lecture. Versus in the Marine Corps and the military as a whole, they're like, you get lecture, application. And that's something that is beautiful about the military, that you have that ability to be like, okay, once you learn it, now apply it. Versus like when you're in school, we don't have that same thought process where we learn, and we never apply it until you get out of the system. And it doesn't work. We don't work that way. Like our brains does not work where they want us to present this beautiful thing that they call like education when you don't apply it. The closest thing that comes is you don't only see it until like maybe like in your last year of your education system where you have to apply through internships. And even then, it's not really applying. How do you apply all of that into like a job where they're asking you to go get coffee or something, or do little basic menial work because they don't think that you have the ability to do that. So it's like we don't, and so we get frustrated because okay, we learn all this stuff, but when do we apply it?
Yeah.
And same times, like we're already used to that system where it's like, okay, we have a field to apply all of that, and I think that's why the STEM field is a lot different, at least in that field. Where I think that's why a lot of veterans like going to the STEM field, because you get to do, like in biology, a good example, you get to learn what you learn in biology, but at the same time you get to apply a lot of it too. Versus everything else is more like, okay, it's a theory.
Yeah.
And same time, like we don't work well with people that are like half-assing everything because we don't see it as, we used to have some shitbag lance corporal, but at the same time we had more that wanted to do the work versus not wanting to do the work,
And that turns into group work, being forced to be work with 3 other undergrads or something, 18-year-old guys who, would rather go out drinking with their buddies instead of lock down and do this one paper. Yeah, I get that.
And so I think as veterans, we see, like, we also have a different maturity level. We have a different experience. Like, one thing I've always told people, and I still continue to tell people, more like, yeah, you might have a 22 year that gets out of the military. Just add another 5 years to 4 years on top of them, because that's how high their maturity level is.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these kids don't have that much. They don't have that experience. They're locked up in this little cubicle of being safe.
Yeah.
And I'm not calling it a safe space, because it's not. It's just more like, this is something where we're not throwing them out there to, like, really, like, my lieutenant saw that there was an issue and he threw us out into the middle of the jungle. They're like, all right, perform. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of it, is like we get that chance to be like, all right, we're gonna go. We might not know this, we're gonna learn it, and we're gonna apply it.
Yeah.
We don't have that same experience in academics.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like that's where we kind of fall half-assed into it. And at the same time, a lot of us coming when we first got out, we don't know how the system works.
Yeah.
Everyone else has already a formal idea how the system already works, of like, okay, this is the class you got to take, blah blah blah. But at the same time, like, you have all these other kids that they talk to each other. We don't have that. Now it's changing. We're changing that dynamic, which is so beautiful, because before we didn't have that, where they're like, oh, how do we get financial aid? How do we work our VA benefits? Now we talk to each other, versus before we would just sit in a classroom and wouldn't even acknowledge each other, even though we might have not gone to the same branch, we might not have gone to the same experiences like in the military, but at the same time we won't talk to each other. And versus these kids, they're already a cohort within their own high school.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny that you say that, because I find myself, even as an advocate, right, even in this world of, I don't know, being available to vets, right, I find myself, like, not wanting to engage with other vets right off the bat. Mm-hmm. Just because, like, I don't know, man. I feel like vets still, how do I say this? I see videos where, like, when vets get together, right? And it's like, it's all, oh, hey, buddy, vet. Oh, you're a vet. Oh, you're a vet. Oh, you're in the Marine Corps. Oh, you're in there. And you see that. And sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes. Mostly when there's, like, liquid courage around or something. But, like, on a day-to-day, like, if I see somebody, you know, high and tight, or they got their Iraqi freedom hat on or something like that, I'll just walk right by. Like, I don't know why. Because I feel sometimes that we don't always want to acknowledge that. Like, I know you got your, like, pride gear on, but, like, I feel like we still want our, like, personal space sometimes.
Yeah,
like we don't always want to engage in that conversation sometimes.
Yeah. I think, yeah. Like,
do you feel like that?
At times, because there'll be times that I see, like, I know I should, but I think what it is also, like, I won't approach those that are just, like, that you could see that there's something in their mind and they have a place to be.
Of course.
I feel like we have to almost test out the waters, because you don't know where their mindset is, whether they're the ones that love the Corps so much that they're, like, I hate to say it, but they're going to be like freaking motards, where, like, super gun-ho, and I'm just like, whoa, that's way too much to me. Or at the same time, you could be that one that they're like, well, yeah, but I had a horrible experience, and so you don't know where they're at until you start kind of feeling out the wall. Like, you start, like, seeing them often coming around, and maybe you start seeing the gear a little bit more, or, like, depending on, like, sometimes, like, what conversation pop up. And even like, I'll be honest with you, like, I remember it took me a while to get to that point. I think it took me the second time around when I came back to school, where I started throwing up, like, the veteran flag. But I didn't throw it like I'm a hardcore freaking, like, gun-ho Marine, blah. I'm more like, so, like, I used to throw it up more like, you know, when everyone goes around to introduce themselves, they're like, well, say something interesting about yourself. Well, I joined the Corps back in 2006, and I mean 2002, and I got out in 2006, and pretty much had a great experience about it. And I thought, now I'm here, and blah blah blah. And but I don't go too brief. I just kind of just throw up the flag, like, hey, maybe there's someone else that might want to talk later on. Maybe they don't want to talk in front of everybody, Or maybe someone else throws a flag and I'm like, hey, you were in the Corps. Because obviously, the way I see it, if you throw up that flag, it's more like saying, you know what, it's cool to talk. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I brought it. Like, that's kind of like I started bringing it up in my head. Like, if I throw up this flag, if somebody comes to talk to me, that means they want to talk to me. If not, that's fine. Yeah. And it's worked out for me pretty well because I've had a lot of encounters with other veterans in the classroom. I had older vets like, oh, I was in the Army back in back in Nam or back or back when I was
back in the Reagan days.
Yeah, like when I was in the Gulf War era, and I went to and then we started having a conversation where it leads into that mutual respect. It's kind of like I feel like we have to establish that mutual respect before because you don't. I feel like half the time we don't know where they sit, so you don't know if they're gonna be like, I did something better than you. Yeah, and they want to they want to be like big dick veterans and stuff like that, and that could I could see how that could turn off anybody. For me, I was like, I'm not looking for. I just want to be like, yo, maybe we might be able to help each other. Yeah, that's how I see it. If I throw up that flag, maybe I might have a question, or you might have a question. Yeah, or maybe they're like, hey, because half the time they're like, hey, so did you hear about XYZ? And I'm just like, yes. Yeah. And then they'll ask, then the follow-up question usually comes up like, how did you do it? Yeah. And that's kind of how the conversations usually begin with me. And don't get me wrong, I see a lot of, sometimes I'll see them, but it's like, I don't know where their mindset is. And I think that's what keeps us from engaging a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, to be an open book, there's this inside complex that I have that if you were a combat vet, I went to combat, right? However, I was not on the front lines. I was kind of blessed in that mindset that I had a high ASVAB score that gave me the opportunity to do this thing, blah, 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 blah. Although I did volunteer to be on the front lines many a time, but we need you, this is that whole mindset. Long story short, when it comes to speaking to combat vets, especially to come onto the show, right? I feel this inferiority, like I'm inferior to them, right? And that's a stupid feeling, and maybe why does it matter? But that's what you're talking about right now. That's kind of my barrier that I have to work through sometimes. It's like, okay, well, I know this person's a combat vet. I know that they're going through some shit that I can't even relate to or empathize with. So how do I get on the same level? But like you're saying, you got to find that common ground, because just because you were in combat does not mean that anything. It doesn't mean anything except for that you were in combat, and that some people were grunts or infantrymen and didn't see combat. So just because you were, 03 anything doesn't mean that you have been in the shit. So it's a stupid feeling for me to have that feeling.
I think I know I definitely know what the feeling what it is, and I think it goes back with everybody that's been in combat or hasn't been in combat or anything. If you know, one thing I've noticed about most vets, they attach themselves to their most memorable experience in their military, where they were at their highest, and that's kind of
when I lost my virginity.
Pretty much. Oh. So a good example is what I say, let's say you were in the shit, and you were out there, you fought the good fight, and unfortunately you did see some, and it's almost like you still remember a lot of your buddies that they didn't come back home, and so that's the most one of the most memorable things of that you want to hold on to. But at the same time, it also gives you I feel like that gives a lot of veterans that motivation to become something stronger, and they don't want to I guess the best way I could explain is this. I feel like it's, if you were if you were a sergeant major of the Marine Corps, that's very intimidating just for anybody that you did your 20 plus, you did all this other stuff, and this is what you hold on to, that persona. Yeah. And this is what keeps you moving forward. Or, you were in the battlefield, and unfortunately you were one of the ones that, that you lost a friend, and you want to keep that memory of them alive by you doing these great things, or it could go both ways too. That also could. bring someone down. That could also, not, I won't say just, I guess, handicap you, because you also bring yourself down at the same time. You want to keep that, you want to be able to keep that status, I guess you could say, of being, my service meant something.
Yeah.
It didn't just mean that I went out there to shoot people, or it didn't mean just that I went out just to support, or I just went out there to, you want to hold on to that memory, because that's what gives you confidence.
Yeah.
And what keeps you alive, I think, is like what really gives you that. If I was this MCT instructor, I was a drill instructor, this is what I keep with me. Like even when you get out, because you know that a lot of people don't have that same status, and you want to do it again. It's like putting your best foot forward at all times. And I think that's what it is. And sometimes we don't acknowledge that the other person might not have that, but you want to have that status of being, this is what gives you confidence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why sometimes it's harder for some people to get past that. We could even use that example for, like, a lot of people could be intimidated by the fact that you're a veteran, but you have your masters.
Mm-hmm.
You have a different status than they do now.
Mm-hmm.
Their greatest status might be that they just got out and that they went to combat. Now they're trying to do this one thing, but they might be having a hard time, and they might see you as the, well, how the hell is it, like, he's getting his master, how do I do this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I live up to that? And I'm afraid to talk to him because he's way up there that I can never be in this world.
Yeah, yeah. I want to get back into why you're so animated about education, right? We talked about you rocking out at a 0.6
Yeah,
GPA.
0.67. I still remember that number.
0.67 GPA. That's something to cheers to right there. And so you're like, I'm done with school, and you're at charter, and then you went into something else.
I went into Sprint.
Because charter, you're like, I'm done with charter.
Done with their leadership.
I'm done.
Yes, yeah.
The leadership is just out of control. You wanted something more in your alley. What was that process?
I guess the initial process was that they were giving me more money.
That's never a bad thing.
Which with less what do you call it, of a
responsibility?
No, less burden on my
Gotcha.
my physical structure, because I was climbing poles, I was going underneath people's houses, and it was killing my knees because I always had to like run cable on hardwood floors. So it became besides all the other freaking disabilities that I had already from the military, so it just added on to it. I was just like, and so I went back to, and then it was more of a technical job. This is something I felt like I was really. That's why I kept going back to technical. I kept going back to my MOS of what I was good at. I was good at troubleshooting. Yeah, I could troubleshoot the shit out of anything practically now. But like at that point in my life, obviously technology has changed. I would have to get back into it. And now I'm in this role where I'm just like, okay, cool. I became a lead technician within like 8-9 months of being with Sprint. I'm fixing phones. I'm fixing their logistics when it comes to like all their stocking and everything. And at the same time, I knew that this time around I had a boss that really respected the work that I did. So he constantly would call me in to like help hire new technicians. Like I was part of the interviewing process with him. So I was no longer seen as the worker bee anymore. Yeah. I felt like I was part of like the more of the management team now. But then again, as that progressed, I realized I want to be an assistant manager or something like that. And they kept telling me, they're like, well, you would have to really prove your worth of how well you do things, because you're not going to be able to make it without some form of degree. And even then, people take forever. You've only been here for a year. Yeah, you're a lead technician, but doesn't mean that you know everything. And I'm like, understandable. And then it became just, again, we went back to just the simple fact that like now we were on top of our game. Our team was like green across the board, which means that we always met our numbers. We rarely lost phones. Our managers were in sync with everyone else, and at the same time they're like, we're putting numbers that we shouldn't be putting numbers anyway, but somehow we were able to match. And then this new manager comes around, and sure enough, this starts stirring the pot. Whereas I'm like, well, you need to do more. I'm all like, wait, what? They're like, yeah, you need to be able to be. I'm all like, we can't if you don't give us the tools. And we kept trying to talk about this. And they looked at me like, I'm all like, no, you need to be able to pull more numbers. I'm all like, yes, we could pull the numbers, but you need to give us more tools. When push came to shove, our managers, again, they just folded. They had no real leadership skills where they were just stepping up for their team. They just are like, no, we need to follow corporate. So it got to the point where they broke up the team completely. So they sent me to Compton. And then my mind said, all right, I'm not going to give up. I'm just going to try to build this new team up, you know?
Yeah.
Nobody in that section, like, they brought up, I don't know what they did to this new store, but they were not having it. And I was like, okay, cool. They're like, fine, let me go get this degree and help them build. You know, that was my ideology, was let me help them build. And I explained this to the regional manager at the time. They're like, hey, her name was Jennifer. And she goes like, hey, Jennifer, I need to leave at this time so I could get my college out of the way, and so I could, like, you know, maybe hopefully become assistant manager. You know, I was thinking that maybe they're looking for leaders. That's good, you know. But no, at this point they're like, no, you're gonna meet the time that needs to be met. They're like, your education really is up to, that's your own personal business. And it became this where, like, but this is for the company. It's not for, like, you know, I'm trying to help the company out. They're like, so it started seeming like there was no loyalty to anybody. It was just all free for all. Whoever you make it, however you want to make it, and it became that atmosphere like it's every person for themselves. And I'm like, that's fine. I could live with that, but now you're also breaking up a team that's been pulling your numbers. That being said, I put up so I could go for assistant. She didn't want to have it for whatever reason or another. And I'm just like, this is getting ridiculous.
So were you getting burnt out or frustrated, or was it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both, because I was putting in hours, again, trying to also go to school. And then I realized, I'm like, these guys don't really care about their employees. You know, They really don't. And for me, if I want to make something better than like, you know, not only for myself but for the people that come behind me, I need to do this on a different way. I cannot be following people that don't want to have the same mind frame that I do, you know? Like, they don't want to become strong. They're happy in their own little stable, like, status, you know? They're happy where they're at. They're happy being, you know, in that position, and a lot of them didn't want to move up anymore. They're like, wait, we're like, what? So why are you denying other people to help move up? Because then to them, they're like, oh, now we would be competition. And I'm just like, no, I'm sorry. And then a lot of times they were doing a lot of like shady stuff on the bottom end, and people were stealing, and I'm just like, I can't work in this type of company that's just gonna, they're gonna, not only do they undercut their own people, but they're also stealing from their own company. It's not, I'm just like, no, I'm sorry.
So what was the straw on the camel's back that you're like, I'm just going to go full-time student?
Where when I ended up in Compton, the managers are like, yeah, just do whatever.
Okay.
And I was just like, no. I'm sorry, I can't just work with.
I'll do whatever. I quit.
Yeah, and that same day I walked out.
Yeah,
and I didn't give them I didn't give them a 2 weeks notice. And I'm like, you guys are gonna be. You're not professional enough that I'm just like that. I don't think you merit a freaking 2 weeks notice, because obviously you're not. You don't really care. You're just here just to buy time. You're not trying to better yourself. I would understand if you don't better yourself, but when you don't try to better the company you work with that's providing you. That's where I drew the line where, like, for me, I always want to be able to say that I want to become stronger, better, you know, become something where I could help out other people behind me. And I realized that every time I kept working in these companies, I kept dealing with spoiled children. When I say spoiled children, these are grown adults.
Yeah.
That, God forbid, their phone doesn't charge because they don't know how to read a manual.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's on them. And I can't cater to them for so long, because they're like, you're a grown adult with a bachelor's, at least a bachelor's or a master's. And at the same time, I was working with, I was working in Westwood. So it's like all these little freaking, like, they were letting their children run wild, and they were the ones. They were disrespecting. Like they're like, they would throw phones at us. Like, I need this fixed. I'm on like, and I'm just looking at this child, and I look at them, and I respond back, and I was like, oh, you can't do it. I'm like, hello. I'm like, these kids need some freaking discipline. And these parents need to understand that they need to like really fix their children.
And then you put them on your knee.
Yeah, and I almost came down to that point. And I was just fed up with them. I'm like, no, I cannot no longer cater to the spoiled. I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. Yeah. That's pretty much what drew me right there.
Yeah.
Because at least when I was working with people in Compton, at least the people in Compton were humble. When they came in, they were hardworking people. Mm-hmm. They were trying to better themselves. They're trying to do better for their situation. They'll come in, and they were honest. They're like, you know what? I dropped my phone and it stopped working, and I don't know what to do with it. Yeah, I would bend over backwards for them versus the one that came in lying to me, saying, "Well, I don't know what's wrong with this phone. It's your stuff." They don't want.
It's covered in cocaine.
Yeah, like they're like, or like,
like it's covered in Dom Perignon,
or like or covered in piss.
What? Okay.
Like they'll drop it on the toilet or something. Okay. And I was just like, and they're like, I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. You could see the piss dripping off the phone as I put on my gloves, and I'm just like, no. I'm all like, I'm sorry. I cannot cater to the selfish. I cannot cater to the spoiled. And this is that's where I drew the line. When I think Compton showed me a lot for the simple fact that they were honest, they were hardworking people. Everybody there wanted to better themselves, and they were not trying to get one over. They knew that eventually they might have to pay. Versus these other guys that have all this money and everything, they are being spoiled and everything. I'm just like, no, I wouldn't. I'm done trying to give my best to somebody that doesn't appreciate it. Yeah, and that's pretty much what drew the straw for me. I was like, that's it. Yeah. I need to work in a different field because obviously this is not working for me.
Okay. You made that decision. Mm-hmm. And then how did you go from a 0.67 into being a college graduate?
Well, that's actually, let's just put it this way. A lot of sleepless nights, I could tell you that.
Because you're not, not to interrupt you, but you're not only just a college graduate, right? Yeah. Like, I've only known in military times, 2 years is a lifetime for some guys, right? But like I've known you shy of 2 years, and what I've seen is that not only do you have your student life going on, right? You are the former president of a co-ed veteran fraternity that is building from the ground up. It's not like you were the president of something that has been around for a few generations, maybe a century. You're the roots of this fraternity. You're taking the veteran advocacy to a whole nother level because you had this whole experience in JC, junior college, that I didn't have, right? So I get to follow behind you like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Right? But you went from a 0.67 mindset to I'm going to be a leader without wanting to be a leader mindset. You're in here and you're like, oh, there's a VRC. Let me help this Veteran Resource Center bloom into something completely phenomenal. There's this group for veterans, this fraternity. Oh, let me help that bloom. Oh, by the way, let me also double bachelor and get into my master's, and it's all seamless. There's no one piece that says Jimmy is this person. Oh, and on the side that Jimmy is also this person. Oh, and also he also does this. It's all this seamless pot of just a good person. So how do you go from a 0.67 getting shitted on by all these employees, which I firmly empathize with you, been there, done that. And you're just like, look, I'm just fed up with this. I'm going to do something better with my life. Yeah. Where's California State Northridge Jimmy from? How did that person just pop out the seams?
I think what it was, I think I started taking one class at a time, first off.
Okay.
Just kind of I realized I'm not the best student, but I feel like I realized I couldn't do this anymore. With education, this was a new goal. So I started taking one class at a time. Then I started adding 2, and then I started adding 3, and then finally on the fall, I ended up taking 4 classes, This is where it started becoming more, because I was making up the classes that I had failed. So I already had to start there, and I didn't qualify for financial aid at this point. So I had to pull everything out of my own, pocket. And
you had already exhausted your bill.
No, I haven't, because I stopped it.
Okay.
Because at this point I was like, okay, I don't want to use it.
You don't want to waste it.
I don't want to waste it, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be a guaranteed thing. But then I realized that I used it one time and I was like, okay, that means that it's stoppable. That's when I knew it was already stoppable. I tested the waters, and I got lucky that it wasn't it was completely stopped. So I knew, okay, then that means I'm going to make up my work and I'm going to go back. But once I started getting to a point where I got a 2.0, and I realized when I had a 2.0, I was like, okay, cool. That from me making up my classes and everything, I was able to get back on financial aid, and I was like, okay, now that I have 2.0, I'm able to participate in things now. I kept going back and forth to see what were my options. When I went to the first VRC, which was in a little bungalow, and I remember going in there, and they were swamped. I mean, veterans were coming out of different different areas of this was back in 2011, so there was more veterans this time, versus when I got out in 2006. There was only a sprinkle of us coming out. And I saw that the same questions kept coming up: how to do this, how to do that, how to do this. And I saw that the staff was getting overswamped. The verifying official was getting swamped, and I'm just like, okay, is there any way I could help? And they're like, well, right now I really can't put you in any position because we don't have the budget or the place to put you in, because there was just a small little bungalow, no more than you could barely fit maybe 6 people the most in that little room. So I'm like, damn, this really sucks. How do we get a bigger area? I saw that there was an opening for student government, and that's kind of where it kind of begins. Then that kind of what kept me, I guess, really alive. Then I'm like, all right. I went into the board, and I applied, and I got the job as one of the senators. And I realized I was the only veteran in this whole board. And everything they talked about was legit. Every single person on that board wanted to do, how do you help the students? How do you help this? How do you help that? No, this is what they're pulling as BS. And then I saw the fight that was I saw that fire. I was and I remember pitching one time, they're a lot of the veterans are stuck in a little hole over there. So well, they're how do we fix that? And they're well, you need to go to this committee and that committee. And then I started understanding how the dynamics work, so how school system works. As I'm sitting, they always need a student representative before the committee comes up with any decisions, and see if the AS would associate students would follow through. And I realized wait, there's actual power behind being a student versus just sitting in the background, having someone else make those decisions. And that's kind of how I started my first year. Once I got my 2.0 back, and I started networking, and then we started advocating a little bit more. Hey, can there any way we could push for a bigger? And then they built this whole brand new student union, and now they put the veterans in this. They're why don't we put one of the veterans in one of these new rooms? And everybody started talking about it. And I remember going back and forth, talking to the person in charge, which was one of the financial aid directors and everything. They're this will be a good place to start. They're well, I don't know. We'll take into consideration. And everything happened so quickly that now they've moved them all into this new room, into the VRC, and they're all right, this is a good start, And then I got hooked up with some of the veterans from the VRC, and one of them his name was Carlos. And then we started realizing, hey, we need more help. Because at the same time we were also dealing with this program called the VRAP program, which is for older vets. We're bringing in guys from the post-Vietnam era that they didn't have no jobs. It was just a bad program to begin with, because they didn't really establish good fundamentals. They just threw money, and they said here, go to school. There was no training, no nothing, but I'm not going to get into that. So I started also helping out the VRC, and we started, my buddy and I, we started like running around. Like his job was to start the vet club. With the new coordinator, she wanted to build the VRC, and that's kind of how it all began. Like, how do we build this?
Yeah.
How do we advocate more? It started, I remember the first Veterans Day celebration that we had, the first Veterans Day, like anything. But like, how about we start identifying like a lot of the veterans? Like, we give them a little ribbon, on Veterans Day, and for the whole week, and they could show their support, and we could do like a little like ceremony, maybe just in the VRC, like a cake or something. And again, I'm bringing ideas that were like ceremonies that were used in the Marine Corps, because this is what I knew.
Yeah,
so like, the Marine Corps cake cutting. I know this will be a good way to like kind of like segue into allow the help of the other branches and figure out like, and then that's how we started building. Little by little, we started acquiring little things. Like, we saw, like, well, is anybody using, like, one of this equipment? They're like, well, it belongs to so-and-so. But I'm like, but it's been sitting here for a whole year. Nobody's using this TV. Nobody's using this, like, DVD player. It's just been sitting here for a whole year. Well, they use it sometime. I'm like, look, if they want to use it, let us know. We'll just put it in the VRC for now. So we brought in this thing. It's been there since we left it there. It's still there today, which is so funny. And we started, like, while everybody was waiting, because everybody was getting agitated with each other while we're trying to do, like, trying to pull out their files, figure out, like, hey, this is what you need to get to classes. And every time something came up, they're like, hey, do you guys need help? They're like, yeah, could you help us out with this file and figure out, like, what do we do with this person? And even we would stay, like, nights just trying to, like, clean up the mess that, like, the VA had created. And after a while, him and I, we kept walking around with other veterans too. Like, we started networking. That was the first time we really networked with other departments. All like that, we realized they were very supportive of military vets. So like, and they're like, hey, and then so once they told us, oh, you guys have all these scholarships, right? They're like, no, and they're like, fine. We'll get you applicants. And we started freaking passing them out to everybody one by one. Like, here, fill this out. Like, we'll tell them, like, hey, just fill this out. You haven't done this already? Bring it back tomorrow and we'll finish it out. Like, we started filling out their applications for them and everything. And same thing, we started working on their benefits on the computers. We're like, hey, we need more computers. And that's how we started getting a lot more veterans involved. So like the more veterans we help, the more support we're going to get. And so we got to be able to teach each other to be able to help each other later on. And that's kind of, we started building from there to a point that they took away our verifying official for a good 6 semester, like a good semester, 6 months. So the VRC at LACC was being run by only the veterans, the student veterans. And we're doing all the certifying. All they had to do was sign. And then we came up with brand new ideas. Like, now that we have this TV, can we connect it to a laptop? They're like, why? So we could freaking show them that if they don't have these requirements met to get their benefits, then they could look over this checklist. So if they see that there's something missing, they could come back instead of wasting our time and us telling them, oh, you need this. And we started putting all the stuff all the programs, what each program meant. We tried to explain. We broke everything down as Barney style as possible. Yeah. Anytime we had an event, we told them to start bringing in pictures, start decorating because it was all white wall. There was nothing on the walls, and we started bring in whatever's, we'll put in other stuff. We started putting the branches. We make sure the coffee was set up. Even the guys that were there at the time were bringing in.
Now you're not working. You're not getting paid at this point. You're just a student.
Yeah. And we're like, okay, let's get the club started. We need more support. We're running out. We're running out of. So then finally, they hit me up. Hey, you want to be one of our employees? What would you want to do? I'm like, look, honestly, we got a lot of guys on that are part of the Office of Special Services, and they're dealing with tutors that don't understand us. I'll go tutor over there if I have to. If you want to pay me, go pay me to be a tutor over there. Then. And that's kind of where it started from. I started tutoring all the veterans that had disabilities, and I realized that we had more benefits for veterans. Or that's how we started spreading that word. Yo, you guys that have TBI and that are having issues focusing. There's a special room where they give you extra time. They give you more. We started spreading these resources to the point where we're running out of manpower to be able to supply all these things. And that's kind of where it began. It's like, and then we realized, like, okay, now we need to start graduating, because if we don't graduate, these guys are gonna think that we're just here forever.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our guys wouldn't graduate, and I'm like, no, we need to start transferring people out, because we need to show these guys that how to transfer out and what opportunities are available, because we don't know what's out there. As far as we know, nobody's ever come back and told us what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
So some of us need to get the hell out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where it started from. When I showed up to CSUN, my coordinator that was at LACC gave me a recommendation to work at CSUN. And that's kind of like when I first started getting involved at CSUN. And because I saw how much issues they were, and the fact that the VRCs are a growing project that, that still hasn't, like, it's barely touching the surface now. Like, barely now finally, like, pushing hard. Is like, I want to keep this momentum going. Yeah. If we get it, like, I saw that there was a good, like, already a good support going on at CSUN. How do we take it to the next level? That was my main, like, with everything in my head, always like, how do we take it to the next level? How do we make this stronger? How do we make it to, this is the go-to place for every single, like, VRC across, like, for now, Los Angeles, and then we'll talk about the states later, and we'll talk about the JCs later. Where do we build from there,
So how?
Like, the main thing is, like, being able to, like, because the space is there for a reason. The space is...
Well, let me interrupt.
Okay.
And let me ask this first. What do you want student vets to know that are not at sea? Because we're getting into a conversation that deals with a project that you're working on right now, which is an outreach to JCs to educate them on the process of transferring, the benefits available, right? First off, how did you come to find out all the benefits available?
I think it started off with just, to be honest with you, just talking to a lot of different vets.
So having conversations
and
networking.
Yeah. I guess the main idea is, like, we got to stop thinking that someone else is going to take care of us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because
1,000%, yes.
Because at the end of the day, nobody understands, first of all, nobody understands our experiences outside of the veteran community, The veteran community knows each other better than they know themselves, And that being said, so how do we expect them to help us if we're not able to put the work in ourselves? And with anything, and, like, that's something that the military teaches. Like, if you wanna better yourself, you need to put your work into it. You want to get stronger. You need to do more weights or something. Or same thing. Like, you need to put that work in. So how do you expect for a veteran community to grow if you're not willing to put that, like, that advocacy? Like, no one knows and no one cares about what the issues are until you bring them up, and you have a whole group of people saying, like, these are the issues, and here's your solutions. You got to find an issue, but you also have to find a solution. You can't always complain about everything without having a solution. Yeah. And that's kind of where I come back to the mindset. Okay, we have this problem. Like, let's say we have, like, we have all these veterans that are not graduating, but, like, the question is now, how and what are the options to fix that? Like, what are the issues and how do we fix it? I think our biggest problem is that I've seen was that everyone complains about an issue, but nobody wants to think about the solution. Yeah. And then once the solution is brought up, nobody wants to work to get that solution available. Yes. And that's where it becomes that, like, where we need to start taking responsibility as a community, as veterans. Well, I'm having issues with, homelessness, or let's say, a good example, we'll do housing. Veterans are coming in, they don't want to live in the dorms because a bunch of kids are, like, 18, 19-year-old that don't, they want to party, they don't want to, or sometimes they don't want to study. You have those that do want to study and everything, but you have to be able to pick them right. The maturity level is completely different. So how do we, and then at the same time, we have veterans that are coming all over from the country, and some have families. How do we address that issue? Like, a simple solution would be just to be able to build, kind of like how they have community dorms, where, all the social sciences in one dorm, all the health and behavior in one, and, like, all the other stuff. Well, why not have a dorm just where all veterans, where you could bring in, like, different like resources to be able to help them with different issues, like your being able to bring mental health, family, and everything under one roof, versus them trying to like scatter them all across the campus.
Yeah.
Now
that seems like in passing conversation, it seems like something big that is unreachable. But you've been in the positions before where big thoughts have become realistic and have materialized into something. So how would you, and this goes back to the how would you recommend somebody listening to this in, let's say, Nebraska, that is going through the same process that says, I wish there was something more for vets. There's 14 of us here, and we're not like tight knit, but we're friendly. How would you recommend that small group of veterans get started? Because this stuff can get done. It's an absolute. If you have an idea and you put in the work, just like you were saying, you gotta work the muscle to build it up. How would you recommend that vets in other areas go about this process?
Okay, I think the best, like the way it helped me out in the past, I start with one person. Like I don't, like you said, maybe there's like a 14 that are not that close knit. Look for that one person that has that same drive, or not even drive, but maybe the same problem, and then getting your voice heard. And I think that's gonna be the hardest part, because a lot of times they're like, well, there's only two of you, but they're like, sometimes all they need is just to start with two people, maybe even one person, because what it is that word of mouth. Like, maybe I have access to only a limited amount of resources, that person that might have the same issue that you partner up with might also have that, like maybe have different resources available. Like they might have a different network, like they might have different people. Doesn't mean that they're in the same field. They're just like, all right, cool. And that voice gets spread. It always starts with the how, and it always starts with, okay, once we know who we need to talk to, like get that voice constantly heard. Like, like, do we need to go talk to AS? Is AS like, the Associate Student Government of whatever campus you're from? They need to be first out to understand that this is an issue that we're having. If that doesn't hurt, then go to different committees and listen to what their issue is. And a lot of times it's going to be more, you have to start with something small, small attainable goals.
Can vets be considered as, like the LGBTQ community? It's a small community that they rate XYZ, or they're small enough to say, we're a small group that we deserve rights to. Are veteran groups, do they fall into that category on campuses?
They do, because they are a protected group. And so because even within our school, they have to add that language into saying that they are a protected group, because they run into like you could use the Vietnam era issue, like where they came in and they were mistreated, and they brought a very hostile environment to a subgroup of people, and a minority group at this point. And also what I would bring up is, like, if that doesn't work, you also understand that the veteran community is a culture. So under that alone should fall under like a protection group, because we are a culture. We don't associate ourselves with the rest of the American culture. We are that 1% that goes out and defends the country. So even then, we're a culture within ourselves, and then even then, within our own branches, is a subculture. And if you use that as a tool, then I mean that's what it comes down to. Use the veteran as it is a culture, and they have to protect every single culture. Same with like the Latinos, the Blacks, the Asians, the Native Americans, and all those other groups. They're protected under that law. Yeah. So same thing same thing with the veteran. The veteran community is a culture. We don't talk like everyone. We don't conduct ourselves, and we're non-traditional students too. Yeah. So we fall under a couple of different categories.
So I want to ask a few questions.
Sure.
One would be, What first and foremost, congratulations on graduating.
Thank you.
Yeah. What'd you major in?
I majored in psychology and Central American Studies.
Now, taking that back to the word legacy that's come up a couple times, what is your legacy? And is it using those 2 bachelors, or are you on a new path now?
I think to be honest with you, I'm using the bachelor's as a stepping stone, really, because that's not my main goal. My main goal is pretty much to be able to help. In other words, I don't want another veteran to go through anything that we went through. Like the first time around, where they're lost, they don't have a community where they could relate to, or they don't feel like that they're back home. Because I think that's the biggest problem, is that everyone. I love the fact that everyone uses the word, "Oh, we need to transition them to be civilians," and this is where I go back to the Black, the Latino, the LGBT community. We never ask these communities to transition.
Yep.
It's almost like no, you don't do that. You know. So why should a veteran community even transition? Why should we go back to being something that we fought so hard to get away from? Not as a negative connotation, but I mean as an identity. We became this new identity. They're like, so why do we need to transition back to something we worked so hard to become?
That's interesting. Yeah.
So what I always tell people is like, it's not a transitioning phase. It's an adapting phase, an acclimatizing to your new environment, and that's something that we've done so many times. You know, we've acclimatized to different cultures, different areas, different war zones. We adapt to our new surroundings, but we don't change. It's not changing. We don't transition. We just I take that back. Not change. But I mean, I say we change to be able to become better within that area. You know, we acclimatize to environments, and so why should? That's why I get pissed off when I always hear the word transition, because I'm like, you don't ask any other community to transition to do anything else. You would never ask that same question to the LGBT community. We need you to transition to be straight. We won't ask the same thing to the Black community, that we need you to be white. Or same with and vice versa across the board. You know. We tell them, all right, you're a culture, and that's how we should. That's the reason why I always say we should treat the veteran community as that.
Yeah.
It is a culture. We are a different identity.
Yeah.
But as for what I'm trying to do is more like, I want to advocate that, you know what, this is the home you fought for. This is something that you wanted to protect. You volunteered to become, the protectors of this nation. So why? They're like, why wouldn't you feel like you're back at home, and why should you transition to becoming the identity you fought so hard to change?
Yeah.
You know? And so that's kind of what I want to create. I want to create that environment where it's okay to be a veteran in the United States.
So what's your call to action?
I think it's more to like have more veterans to step up to the plate, like especially the educated, to step up for like your brothers and sisters are coming behind you, because that's kind of like what the military teaches us. Like that's our culture. Like whatever they give you, yeah, it might be shitty, but at the same time, like you need to give it back, better than you got it, and that's kind of like it's always been. That's how the military's always been,
Yeah.
They're like, we need to start thinking that way again. They're like, whatever they give us, we need to turn it around and make it better. And that's kind of where I want every veteran to step up and be like, if you're in an environment, how do I make it better?
How do I make it better? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Versus just following the norm of just being like complacent.
Well, we hear it in the VRC, guys come in there bitching, like you said earlier, you have all the problems in the world and no solutions because you choose to stay on one side instead of the other. Yeah.
Yeah, because everyone can complain all day. It doesn't mean, do you want to do something to change it? So like, well, to them, a lot of them will be like, well, that's not my chair. That's not my problem. Unfortunately, that is your chair.
Yeah.
And that is your problem.
Yeah.
That should be everyone's problem.
Yeah. Especially if you are acknowledging that it's a problem.
Yes.
Yeah. So what would you tell vets who are struggling to find themselves today?
To understand that, I think it's normal to feel that way in the beginning because you have all these different aspects of your life, and we haven't even dwelled into your basic culture where you come from. Just because even the culture where you come from wants you to change back to who you are, and that shouldn't be and it's normal to feel out of place. It's just when you struggle, I feel like we need to struggle because this is what we've been trained to be. We are trained to struggle and come out best on top.
Mm-hmm.
And once you understand that the struggle is there for a reason, you could come out so much stronger once you understand that, you know what, this is another obstacle that I could overcome, and it's gonna be hard in the beginning, but once you get through it, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And guess what? Now you get to help out those that might be going through the same thing that you went through. And that's gonna make everything worse so much more, 10 times so much more better in your life.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's like you look back and you're like, you know what? I might have gone through this, but guess what? Now I know that the guy behind me doesn't have to go through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they could be more successful, and they could become stronger, and they could build that community even stronger.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Eventually, we're all gonna get old. And we're gonna be those freaking guys at the Legion or the VFWs or whatever, or the DAV or wherever you're
some of us already are, right? Yeah. Manny.
And even there's where we're just gonna be able to where we're gonna have to we're gonna have to have someone help us out later on.
Yeah.
And at least this way, when they come in, they won't have to deal with the stuff that we're dealing with now.
Yeah. Instead,
now they could deal with bigger issues at the other end.
Yeah.
Little fights, little victories help.
Small victories.
Yes.
What is what is the best advice for transitioning service members or adapting or acclimatizing service members? What's the best advice you have for guys getting out the service? For our military family getting out of the service?
Understand that everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Like every veteran has a story. It might not be your story, but every veteran has a story. But understand that at one point or another, we were all family. Whether we were family in the past, present, or future, we're still family. It doesn't matter what war we fought in. We went through the same ideologies of one idea that I think bonds every single person, and that's every single veteran, is that we didn't run from whatever what the United States asked us to do. We pushed forward, and so that being said, just gotta be patient and understand that okay, how do I people you're gonna be pissed off at people. That's normal. That's okay to be pissed off. It's okay to be, as long as you understand that you have to be able to learn to eventually learn to become stronger. And kind of even look back at yourself. It's when am I gonna take responsibility for my own feelings? How do I change? And that's kind of what it came down to me, was I was mad, I was angry, I was pissed off at the world, but eventually I realized that there's another mission for me, and that I need to be able to use that energy that I have for frustration for something bigger and better. I might not get the results I might get all the time, but guess what? As long as I'm pushing it, I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to make this world a little better. And if I'm able to put my own, and that's the thing though, and that's what stops us. I think it's a lot of times our frustrations will stop us, and that's something that I always tell people. Sometimes when you're stuck, you need to learn to look at your life and realize, what am I doing that's keeping me stuck here, and how do I make myself stronger?
Yeah, and I know that feeling, man. Being stuck. I think it's one of those things that we inherently feel just because of the environments that we find ourselves in, and sometimes feeling lonely. And yeah, I get that big time. So if you could tell Recruit Guevara one things to prep, if you could tell him one thing to prep for today, yeah, what would that be?
Oh man, I was definitely if I was to go back to Recruit Guevara, I was tell him that there's gonna be hard days. You're gonna freaking hate life. But guess what? It's all like at the end, it's gonna be worthwhile because you're the one that makes. You're gonna decide whether you're gonna have a good experience or bad experience, and I would tell that recruits, all like, as long as you have your heart in it, everything else doesn't matter. Whether people are trying to fuck you over or not, as long as your heart's in it, everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's 1,000%. That's truth, all up and down the board. So, are there any topics you would like to speak about that we may not have covered? You think?
I don't know. It's a.
I know you're a man of many many moods.
I think it's I don't know. Going back to, I guess, reacquiring yourself, coming back also. I think it's also finding identities that you find yourself like really close to. Like a good example, I know a lot of times I've known veterans that will stay away from the veteran community because that's an identity they might be already exhausted with. And I know a lot of veterans that also join like the LGBT community, and that's fine because a lot of times your experiences might able to help out another subgroup. Maybe you're like, okay, there's enough. Maybe you might say, well, in this section of there's a lot. I could always go back to the veterans. That's not a problem, but they're pretty much well taken care of for whatever reason. But there's always another group that might need your help, and I think that's the biggest thing is that we forget that there's also more to us. We're very different identities. Like, there's a lot of people that have families that are like, okay, maybe I want to focus more on, how do I make my child stronger? Do I join a group for like, or do I want to be part of like, helping kids to get, maybe they're single and they're like, well, I remember growing up as an underprivileged kid. Also focus on that. Not everything necessarily has to be veteran related, and that's the reason why I double major, because at the same time I didn't understand where a lot of my family background came from. Like I didn't know the issues that they were dealing with. Like, I didn't understand their history or why the way they were, or the way they are, or and why are they even here to begin with. And a lot of times, once you understand that history, you realize that there's other groups that are going through even harder struggles. And it's okay, because that means that you found a mission. And I think at the end of it, that's what I always go back to, that same ideology. When you join the military, you have a mission. Your mission is to become whatever service member you are, a Marine, sailor, airman, whatever, soldier, coastie. And then after that, they send you out to go do different missions. You need to go do, take the objective and
humanitarian missions,
or whatever they send you out to. And then once you get out, you forget that you got to continue that mindset that there's always going to be a new mission for you, and you can't just sit back and if you're feeling depressed and angry, trust me, there's a mission out there for you. Like if you're feeling lonely, trust me, you could find another group and make them stronger. And because you have every single veteran I've ever met has that, like, obviously if you made it that far in your military career, you have that mindset to create another group to become stronger. Something that you identify yourself. Maybe, you want to help out a bunch of these single mothers or a lot, like I know a lot of women veterans, they're very strong women, and they want to help out a lot of these battered women, and they're like, how do we make you stronger? Maybe your niche is making people physically stronger, like I know guys from kinesiology and stuff like that. I know, or maybe to create a mental. There's always something to become So the moment you feel like you have no mission, you have to find and look at your own identities and be like, oh, what are the issues within my own identity? do you fall into the LGBT? Or like we even have veterans that got deported. There's also that. There's also there's a plethora of like issues of identities that need our leadership skills to create that. And I think that's something that everyone forgets, that we're coming from like a lot of leadership skills. We have a lot of those leadership skills that everyone forgets to talk about. You know, you've been trained to, and even if you're just a follower, guess what? Maybe you want to follow a very strong leader. Guess what? They're not gonna be able to make it on their own without someone to support them as well. Mm-hmm. You don't always have to be the forefront of it, but if you're able to help them out, and maybe you know how to do like accounting very well, or if you're good with numbers, or maybe you're good at like writing, or maybe you're someone that speaks up, and that's what they need. They need someone to speak up for their cause. Yeah, there's always something there.
Yeah. There's always, you can find your niche in a boat, right? Mm-hmm. And like you said, you spend 4 years in, and even if you were a paper pusher that whole time, you've learned some type of leadership trait. You know, you're probably in charge of field day or something at some point, you know? So, yeah, there's a lot that individuals getting out can give back into some aspect of some place in the world. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I brought you on because I felt you had a story that was interesting and that was usable. It was something that is relatable and that people would enjoy listening to and can pull just knowledge from, right? You were the perfect candidate for this position. So I always wrap up asking, do you have somebody in mind who could be sitting in that chair that has something to give back to the vets that are listening to this? Because I'm going to call them out and I'm going to invite them on.
Well, I know a lot of vets and I think this is why it's very unique that you say that, because I can't just think of one. I could think of several, but it's because each vet, like I told you in the beginning, each vet has his own story. Yeah.
And you do know a lot of people, so maybe that's the wrong question to ask you. Why don't you just write me a list out and tell them, hey, this guy's going to call you and invite you onto this podcast.
well, I think, because I mean, even then, though, like we could, I think, I don't know if he's listening or not, but like Manny's a good example to use because
Manny will get on here. Yeah, I will force him to get on here at some point.
I think he has a plethora of knowledge, and his way of seeing things is very unique. Yeah. You know, he had a very unique story.
And I'm going to break him apart. I'm going to open up his dark side.
Good luck. But I think it's because especially like also like, you know, Chris Lee.
Kinesiology Chris?
Yeah, Chris Lee. Yeah, he has a very unique story as well. And
I'm going to get Chris on because I know his story. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting story too.
It is, and even like some of our guys from the American Legion right now, a lot of their leadership is now younger now. Mm-hmm. It's no longer the crusty old 60, no, not even like 80, 70-year-old like commanders. Now they're becoming younger.
Oh, I'll have Michael on here at some point.
Yeah, and even Fernando as well. So they all bring in a very unique like aspect, and
that's Vice Commander Michael.
Yes, first vice.
No, you're right.
And even I don't know if you've had Drew on here, but
no, we're still in scheduling
because his story is even unique as well because he comes practically from the same area we came in. Like he came in from LACC, and so did I, and we met down there as well. And his finding of who he is was different than my route, even though we went to the same schools. Yeah, we went to LACC, we went to CSUN together. Yeah, but we didn't take the same path.
Yeah, but you're still essentially doing the same. You're both advocating.
Correct.
In different avenues.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's so. I mean, the list could carry on forever. So,
Yeah.
And
wrong question to ask you.
But yeah, I mean, everyone has its story, and I think the biggest problem is that we're so accustomed to being in servitude as to the country that we never want to tell people our stories because we feel like we're still the protectors of this country, and I think that's something that we really need to take in is like, God, not only are we the physical protectors of this country, but we should also be the mental, the emotional, because we have those leadership skills. We're willing to step up, and we're willing to put ourselves in such crazy situations that some people would call extraordinary, and we call it just another day.
Well, Jimmy, this conversation has been everything that I thought it was going to be. It was phenomenal. It was fun.
That was fun.
There was emotion. I mean, there was realness, and I think people got to know you a little bit better than they would ever get to just kind of walking in and seeing this big old grump sitting there. But I'm honored to have you.
No, it was a pleasure. It was definitely an honor to be here.
Yeah,
I know. Like I said, I even don't like telling my own story.
Yeah,
but I know I'm working on that.
Yeah. Well, it's a good story because there's a lot of stress intertwined of that mindset of I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And, I know it's hard to get it all out into one little conversation, but your transition from military to this lifestyle, this outside lifestyle, or the adaption, or I don't want to get beat up, but you had a lot of struggle, and we didn't really tap into, but you hit it on the head of what it takes to persevere and be on top. So again, much appreciated. And for anybody who's kept through, this is a two-parter.
I'm bad.
No, not you're bad at all.
Talk too much.
Believe me, the ones that are two-parters are the most interesting. So, for those who stuck with this conversation, we sincerely appreciate you sticking along for the full ride. And I'm looking forward to having this spread out for people to get to know my brother Jimmy over here. You're the Vet is on iTunes now. You're the Vet is across the board with other podcast hosts. So look for You're the Vet, spread You're the Vet, and show my buddy some love. If you have, do you have any contact information?
I think the closest thing I have is just my Facebook and my Instagram.
So if they have any questions, can they get at you on Facebook?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay.
I'm usually pretty open to just let me know who you are, because then I'll be like, who are you?
Hi, Jimmy. I heard you on the radio. Yeah. If you want to reach out to Jimmy, I'll have his contact information in the show notes. But thank you so much for tuning in to You're the Vet for one more week, and I hope that you pulled something from this conversation, and I hope that it helps you. And if it doesn't help you, I hope that you know somebody it will. So keep pushing the message out there, keep tuning back in, and keep waking up in the morning to do something good. So with that being said, we're out.
Thanks.